So I mentioned that the word God is mentioned 4 times in the Texas Constitution. In the preamble, we're humbly invoking Almighty God for His blessing as we establish His Constitution. The other places in the Bill of Rights in Texas, Article 1, Section 6, freedom of worship. All men have a natural and indefeasible right to worship Almighty God according to the dictates of their own consciences. No man shall be compelled to attend, erect, or support any place of worship or maintain any ministry against his consent. No human authority ought. That is a mandatory ought. What they say, no human authority is allowed in any case to control or interfere with the rights of conscience in matters of religion, and no preference shall ever be given by law to any religious society or mode of worship. But it shall be the duty of the legislature, and our legislature has abysmally failed in their duty, their constitutional duty. It shall be the duty of the legislature to pass such laws as may be necessary to protect equally every religious denomination in the peaceable enjoyment of its own mode of public worship.
What was that section?
That is Article 1, Section 6. And the reason I read that as well, because I'm going to be talking a little bit about a dissent by one of the justices with regard to a case that was brought up in 2001, Waite versus Waite, particularly with regard to the issue that I'm talking about here. So if you look at the Marxist Monstrosity, Chapter 1 talks about the general provisions, the public policy. Marriage, it's very interesting. Marriage in Chapter 1, marriage isn't defined. We don't even know what marriage is. But they do have, in Chapter 1, how to dissolve a marriage. We have dissolution of a marriage. What do you even dissolve? We don't even know what marriage is. But somehow, we do have the ability to dissolve whatever it is that's not defined. But it also says in subchapter B that every marriage is presumed valid in order to provide for the stability of those entering into the marriage relationship in good faith and to provide for an orderly determination of parentage and security for the children of the relationship. It is the policy of the state to preserve and uphold each marriage against claims of invalidity unless a strong reason exists for holding the marriage void or voidable. And I will tell you, no-fault divorce is not a strong reason.
Yep.
No-fault divorce violates the policy of the state. It violates not just the religious conscience of people, but it also violates the policy of the state. Our legislators have not done their duty to enact legislation to protect people who enter into marriage with a religious purpose in particular, and to provide and to protect families and children and our grandchildren and our progeny. Chapter 2 talks about the marriage relationship. It says that there's basically one paragraph about the marriage relationship, the rights and duties of spouses, the duty to support. Supposed to support each other in marriage. And then it gives 17 pages that deal with the topic of a marriage license. That seems to be a little bit out of proportion to me. Marriage is a fundamental right. You don't need a license for a fundamental right. Especially a license in which I would say that the state is giving a license for fraudulent reasons. The state is not protecting marriage. The state has its own reasons, I guess. Alabama, by the way, has done away with marriage licenses. I'm not going to go into the whole history of marriage licenses right now, but again, for free people, I don't even think that marriage licenses are necessary. And I will tell you that if you're a minister of the gospel, in my opinion, you should never perform a state marriage. And I will get into that. Because as a believer, as a believing pastor, minister, priest, you believe that God has created marriage, and that marriage you become one flesh till death do you part. Except if there are some very specific reasons that the marriage should be severed. And yet, I could get up here, if I'm a minister, I could marry two people, and I'm lying to them if I'm trying to say, the marriage is permanent, because the state will say, your religious marriage means nothing. After I spoke at one of the GOP conventions on this topic, this one lady came up to me and said, thank you. I could never understand how it was that my pastor married me, but a judge could divorce me against her will. This is sickening. This is Texas in the Texas Family Code. And that's why I say Marxism is subverting free people within the family code. Very interesting, when Lenin got the power, what did he do? He took marriage, which was a religious institution, done by the church, and he made it a civil institution. By doing that, I believe he did two things. Number one, he weakened the authority and the respect for the church. He weakened that. And he also created divorce on demand. Divorce for any reason, for no reason. You could secretly divorce somebody. You could, whatever. There is no permanency to marriage. So you weaken the family. The two best defenses against communism are a strong church and strong families. And yet our Marxist monstrosity, the Texas Family Code, doesn't mention God. It's a godless document. And it says the family can be destroyed at any time, for any reason, for no reason, forcefully. What kind of society does that create? So we do have things in here, like I said, chapter 2, we talked about the marriage relationship, the duty of the spouses, talked about the marriage license, talked about the ceremonial marriages, premarital education courses. They've given the facade that they really care. But according to the Texas Family Code, none of this stuff matters. It's a distraction. It's a lie. It's a sham. This is my opinion of it. I'm not an attorney. I'm just somebody who's been fighting this and saying that this is completely and abysmally wrong. Chapter 3 talks about marital property rights and liabilities. If you remember, Marxism wanted to eliminate private property. We live in a community property state. I was in a pre-retirement seminar yesterday, and they were talking about you go to retire. If you've been divorced, before you can collect your retirement benefits, they need to see a court order. A judge who may have divorced you 35 years ago against your will, his atrocious decision can determine your retirement.
Yeah.
It's awful. Chapter 4, premarital and marital property agreements. Chapter 5, homestead rights.